We take real cases up to the Supreme Court. We represent the parties involved. We do all the writing, our briefing, and if we're lucky enough and the Supreme Court decides ultimately to take the case, we do the argument as well. The students in the clinic do everything except one thing, which the court does not allow them to do. They cannot get up on the day of argument and represent the client before the Supreme Court. They do, however, do all the initial research. They do all the initial drafting. They're the ones who do the primary monitoring, that is looking out and reading all the cases decided by the United States Court of Appeals and state Supreme Courts to try to identify those cases that the Supreme Court might be interested in taking up and reviewing. So students have experience with every step of the case and usually get the first crack at every step of the case. The case is Henderson versus United States. It concerns the scope of the so-called felon in possession statute. This is a statute that makes it a crime for someone who's already been convicted of a felony to possess any firearms. In this case, Mr. Henderson turned over his firearms to the FBI before he was convicted as a condition of gaining bail before trial. The government has kept possession of the firearms ever since then. Mr. Henderson has now been out of prison for many years and would like the government to transfer those firearms, which he doesn't possess himself, to a third party. So the third party can either keep them in trust or sell them and give the money to Mr. Henderson. This is also an issue that, although the stakes may be small in a particular case, it affects many people. There are over 1 million people convicted of felonies in this country every year. And in many cases, the value of the firearms can be quite high. We'll be making the argument that the statute means what it says. It says that a convicted felon cannot possess a firearm. It doesn't say he can't sell a firearm that the government is possessing on his behalf. It doesn't say he can't own a firearm. If the court were to go our way, people in Mr. Henderson's position could ask courts to have their firearms, which are being held by the government, transferred to a third party for the third party to sell, or perhaps to hold as a trustee until they could be given to the owner's children or something like that later on. If the government wins, on the other hand, and the rule below remains in place, then people in Mr. Henderson's position will effectively lose all their ownership interests in their firearms, not only their possessory interests. It's clear they won't be able to possess them anymore, but they won't be able to reclaim the economic value of them either. And that seems to be a rather harsh penalty.